everyone. I'm Dorothy Vu. I'm a senior communication specialist in the ESP qualities department, and I'm excited to introduce our presenters for this evening, Brenda Alvarez and Mary Ellen Flannery, who are senior writers on NEA's editorial team. You might have seen their bylines on many of our NEA Today articles, as they have worked with many educators like you to lift up your stories. They will be presenting this session on the power of storytelling and the importance of using your voice. I'm now going to pass it over to Brenda.
Great, thank you, Dorothy. So as I'm getting my shared screen going, I would love to hear from you all right away. If you could let us know why you signed up for this workshop and what you're hoping to get out of it. Let's see. Okay, so part of what we do in communications is to advance NEA strategic goal. And one of the ways we do that is by storytelling. And so we have some objectives for you. So Mary Ellen and I are journalists by trade, and we tell our members stories. And this helps drive I think I went a little too fast. This helps drive NEA strategic goal to transform public education into a just an equitable system for all students, right? So communications helps us do that. And so part of what we want to do with you today is to really have you understand some of the elements that we use in our storytelling so that you could develop your own stories. And then although we're journalists, you don't have to be a journalist to really tell a good story. And what we want you to really think about when you're thinking about moments in your day, in your career, that storytelling is a part of your leadership journey, because we don't tell stories just to tell a story, right? Stories are about you, they're about your experiences, and they're about where you share them in public spaces. And so with that, we're gonna kick it off with a video.
Life skills like brushing your teeth, getting dressed are not easy for a lot of children with disabilities to pick up. It's not easy for them to make friends. They don't have confidence in themselves, and they can very quickly fall behind. I am a mother of 2 boys that are on the autism spectrum, and I am an educator at a local elementary school. Teaching these life skills was promised in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and it has been drastically underfunded. It impacts every single part of their lives. I know what this lack of funding looks like. It's students that are coming in halfway dressed, overstressed teachers, students that are having outbursts because they can't tie their own shoes. Teachers are pulling money out of their own pockets because of the lack of support that they're receiving. That's not okay. They deserve better. We need a fully funded Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We are at a crucial point, and we need to take action right now. I became an educator because I saw firsthand what is important for special needs students. They're smart and witty and funny and quirky. They deserve to have the very best education available to them, just like every other student.
Nice. All right. So that's April. She is or was a paraprofessional in Virginia. And we share the story because there's a couple of things about it that I think are helpful to pay attention to. She uses a lot of really good details, right? Like she talks about brushing your teeth, making your friends, and those are the kind of details that bring a story to life. She also makes clear that she's an expert, right? She uses language like I am, I know, I saw firsthand. And essentially, she puts together this really easy to understand story kind of construction. She describes a problem. She's got all these kids who need specific kinds of support, and then she explains what is the solution, right? It's a fully funded IDEA. And that brings us to the question of why do you tell stories? And Brenda's going to dive into that a little bit for us.
Yes. So April, as Mary Ellen said, paints a really nice picture, right, of things that are relatable, brushing teeth, tying shoes, right? So she really speaks to the points that you see here on the screen. She's making an emotional connection, right? She's sharing some values. And the goal of her story is to really get people behind her in her cause, right? And that's what we all want. We want people to join us in the type of movement work that we do. But in addition to what you see on the screen, I want to share with you a fun fact, and that's humans are the only species that we know of, right, to tell stories. It's really built into our DNA, and there's a lot of research that speaks to all this brain activity when listeners are able to listen and engage with a story. So, for example, one side of the brain lights up when the person is listening to a story, and then the other side of the brain lights up when the person is able to interact with the storyteller. So it's the listening part of our brain that really can move someone to take an action with us, right? Whether it's to make a phone call, email a legislator. So this is one of the reasons why we tell a story, because our brains love them. But at a very basic level, we tell stories because it's a good way to share information. It paints a really clear narrative, and it cuts through a lot of the distractions that we're faced with. It's also a good way to remember things, and it helps us really pay attention. And oftentimes we tell a story because they're better than facts, right? It's better than numbers and statistics. For example, we always share the statistic that public schools lose nearly $2 billion from corporate tax breaks, right? And we know that's a huge number, but it's really hard to digest. But if you're able to pair a story with that number, then you're more likely to make that connection for someone. So if we can have people throw in the chat what else stories do for us, and then I don't have access to the chat. I don't know, Mary Ellen, if you could see it.
I can. I'm looking at people's reasons for joining us tonight, Brenda, and I think they're all really good. It's like people who want to advocate, our colleagues want to advocate for their students and for their members. They want to connect with people. They want to make public schools a better place.
Awesome. So I heard the word connect, right? And that's another reason why we tell stories, is because we want to make that connection. Is there anything else popping up?
Yeah, Stephanie is saying that stories do all of that, but also give inspiration or concepts of different outcomes, which is true. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many reasons why we tell stories, right? Like stories help make us relatable to one and each other. They're contagious. They humanize the issue, right? And on a deeper level, right, it's that connection that we want to help people join us in our cause and compel them to take action with us. And Red for Ed is a really good example of this, because they had really compelling numbers, right? Some of our state affiliates, California CTA at the time, talked about how their schools were underfunded by nearly $900 million, right? Arizona lawmakers had cut student funding by nearly 40%. Like, those numbers just on surface level sound awful, right? But that wasn't enough to really move the needle to get people to rally on the streets with us. It wasn't until we started to hear their stories, and their stories were pretty awful. I mean, we had people making air conditioning units with styrofoam coolers and ice, right? There was someone who brought their own mouse traps because their school building was infested with mice, and the school district wasn't providing any of that. So it was those stories that really pushed thousands and thousands of people onto streets all across the country, right, to demand action and to demand better from our lawmakers. And then I want to speak to this last point, that if you don't tell your own story, someone else is more than happy to tell it for you, and you may not like their version. So it's really critical for us to get out there and use our stories with intention, right?
Brenda, someone makes that point in the chat. Amy says no one can tell our stories like we can. And that's true, right? No one can. You're really in it, so it's an authentic story. David and Helen both also raise the idea that telling stories as educators to students is helpful in the classroom, right? In creating relationships and making connections, and relationship learning is all about relationships. So yes.
Right, exactly. Because it's you're sharing values, you're sharing what's important to you, to build those relationships and make those connections. So we are going to go to the next slide, which is another video from one of our
Yeah.
members.
So while you listen to this video, keep in mind what Brenda just said about why we tell stories. This one is from Margaret Powell, who's one of your colleagues in North Carolina. As you listen, if you think you know why Margaret is telling this story, drop it into the chat. But let's hit play.
I'm a mom of two boys, and then to be with hundreds of children every day, it's my job internally to just care for children.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to me as an educator that I'm the first person that greets the student when they enroll in school. I love making people smile when they enter into the school as the new person. A student's first day of school will determine what the rest of their school year will be like. We never want to have to send a kid into a classroom and there's not a desk for them to sit in. We don't want anyone to feel like they don't belong. When we have overcrowded classrooms, every student will not get what they need, and some kids will be left out. It's heartbreaking. These kids are our future. It's my responsibility to protect our students. I see something's going on that may address a need that needs to be met so that I can help develop strategies to support those students. When we don't have all the resources and our kids left out, that's when we're...
Oh, sorry. I'm gonna fast forward it.
Kids are our future. It's my responsibility to protect our students. I see something's going on that may address a need that needs to be met so that I can help develop strategies to support those students. When we don't have all the resources and our kids left out, that's when we're failing them. We need a 2020 candidate who will fully fund our schools, fight for resources, and listen to educators. Family is important to me. Whether it's your biological family or your school family, it's our responsibility to make sure that they have everything they need to be successful.
Yeah, Lee, she does care. She wants the best for all students. Yeah, she paints a picture of a problem, right? Kids who don't have desks, kids who don't feel like they belong, and she names the cause of the problem is due to a lack of funding. I think she's telling this story so that people understand the problem, what's at stake, and so that they're moved to action. And in this case, she says pretty explicitly what the solution is. She says it's to elect candidates who support public education. So that brings us to the question of who, when, and where to tell your stories. This has gotten more complicated over the years, right? There's a lot of new places where you can tell your stories. I've been writing a lot about student debt, public service loan forgiveness, which I hope everybody applies for if they're eligible. And there was a University of Maine professor who told his whole story of student debt on Twitter. There's a lot more on Instagram, more and more on TikTok. But there are still all the old good places there always were, like letters to the editor, public comments at school board meetings are really important. Face-to-face, one-on-one conversations are the most important. And then you got to keep in mind who you're telling your story to, right? Like you'll have a variety of audiences. There are parents, there's members, there's potential members, and you might have different goals in mind depending on who your audience is. These past couple of years with all the federal pandemic relief money flowing into schools, we've written a lot of stories, Brenda and I, on how that money is being spent. And there was a group of union members in Iowa City who were able to use their voice to compel the district to spend that money on more nurses and academic support specialists. So if your audience is parents, that story would have been told in a way that makes clear that your kids are getting what they need to be successful. And your audience is members, that story is more about, it's like a union power, like your union is here for you and helping you get what you need to help your kids be successful. So those are those are all things you have to keep in mind. We also want you to keep in mind the NEA message framework. But do you mind flipping over that? It looks complicated. We do all day trainings on this framework, and I'm going to give you a very quick overview. The framework was developed by NEA's message specialists a couple of years ago, and it was tested in focus groups of members, potential members, and parents. And what we learned through those field tests is everybody agrees that students, no matter their race or where they live, deserve safe schools, and everyone agrees they deserve the supports they need to thrive in school. These are shared values. And so when you're telling your story, try to keep in mind that the most powerful messages, most powerful stories are ones that are focused on students. So, like we're working these days with a lot of locals that are bargaining new contracts. It's like in Portland, they're talking about facilities and how, their classrooms are over 90 degrees. If you use the NEA framework, you'll be talking about how can students possibly learn when their classrooms are over 90 degrees? Or we're talking about planning time. Like how do educators get ready when they don't have time to prepare? Compensation is really a student issue too, right? Like you all need to be paid enough to live in your communities and be able to provide a consistent face and a consistent relationship with your students. That is the NEA message framework in a nutshell. Just make sure you keep students in the middle of your stories. And how do you do that? How do you tell a story, Brenda?
Yes. How do you tell a story? I wanna underscore that value piece, because that's really what I'm sure I've said it before. That really connects us. So when Mary Ellen and I tell our stories, we often start with that shared value, right? Like students deserve a clean and safe classroom, right? They deserve technology, up-to-date technology. They deserve a librarian and a school nurse in every building, because who's going to say no to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you start off with that shared value, it just draws people in, and it makes them, immediately, pay more attention to what you have to say. So I don't know how to get rid of that little top bar on my computer. So if you see the mute, I apologize. And that top bar. But how to tell a story. So no different from when we were in our, middle school days, where we were instructed to write an essay and start with an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. It's the same framework. I just happen to call it a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so that using that framework lets you really kind of bring people in to your story, because stories need people, because that's what kind of draws that emotion out in your story. And it creates that detail that we need to really see it. And we want to make sure that we're adding the right amount of detail. We don't want to overload our stories with all of this other information that's not relevant at that time. So when you think about the story that you're creating, you want to think school board meeting. I have 3 minutes to tell this story. What is either my shared value, what is the goal that I'm trying to achieve, or the problem that I'm trying to solve? What are the choices that I have? What's the outcome that I want to see? So you want to pack in a small amount of information, but the right information. To the other point, no jargon allowed in NEA world. We use a lot of it, right? So the golden rule is that if you're talking to someone who is a non-educator and this person doesn't know what you're saying or what that term or phrase means, then find another word. And your story should definitely have a call to action, right? You want to be specific with it. You want to tell the person what you want, them to do. Do you want them to show up to a meeting? Do you want them to make some phone calls? Where is it? When is it? So you want to be as explicit as possible with your call to action. And then the last part is, no small story is insignificant, right? They all have value because these are your lived experiences, right? So we have amazing members all across the country who do incredible things, right? We had one member a few years ago donate a kidney, right? And that's wonderful, but that's not really relatable. So what is relatable is, for example, a school bus driver who started Books on a Bus program, right? Because that's something that's feasible, right? And people can relate to that when they're with their students, you know, driving a bus, and they can think, oh, I can do something similar. So please, your stories are powerful, and I'm sure you have plenty of them to share. And here's another story.
Yeah, so this is an example from one of our higher ed members. Sheila is an office administrator at UMass Amherst. So as you listen, keep in mind some of the things Brenda just mentioned. You know, is it relatable? Is she talking about people? Does she talk about numbers? Is there a call to action? Does she describe a challenge? And feel free to chime into the chat or the Q&A as the video plays.
I served in the military for a little over 8 years because I do believe in the public good and public service. Now here I am helping students, and I still continue to serve the greater good while I'm here in higher education. Instead of valuing education and putting that first, the focus is on the bottom line. I think the model for public education is shifting more and more towards private sector business models. We have to compete to survive. And I feel like the more we lose, we start to lose these values of the public good. We are dealing with this on multiple fronts. I think that's what's so frustrating about it. Every time we get a raise, they also raise our health insurance rates. Parking rates go up every year. That feels more like a barrier than it should. We have buildings that should not be inhabited by students and people who are working here 40 hours a week. When we start fighting for these 2% raises, it's the difference between, needing food stamps and not needing food stamps. It's heartbreaking because our staff work really hard and they deserve to be respected. One really important thing that the union does is we do try to organize our members to advocate. Over the past year, we've been fighting for better wages, safer working conditions, properly ventilated buildings. It's important for us to fight for those rights. Our employees aren't just employees. They have lives. We need to be advocating for ourselves and our students because this is a crucial time for them. They're just figuring out what their careers are going to be. They're figuring out what they're going to do to go serve in their communities. They need support. And one of the great things about organizing is you have the power of numbers behind you.
Okay, so if there's anything that stands out to you about Sheila or Sheila's story, just, pop it into the chat. There's a couple of things I like about what she does. She starts with the shared value, right? She talks about the public good. She talks about her military service, her belief in public service. And, hopefully this is a shared value. Hopefully everybody associated with public education believes in the public good and in public service. She talks about the challenge, right? And she, again, puts it in details that are relatable, like Brenda said. Her university is more concerned with the bottom line than with educating students. There's buildings that are uninhabitable. Parking is unaffordable. I can relate to that. And then she clearly defines the solution. It's the union. It's the union that's fighting for students to make campus safe, to get students the education they need, to represent the concerns of their members. And then the third thing I like is, her story easily is paired with an action, right? Like Brenda was talking about what is the point of your story? I think you could use this story to ask members to write to state legislators. You could ask them to come to a union meeting. You could just ask people, just to get more involved. Let's look at the next video, Brenda. You want to look at Scott too?
Yes.
My name's Scott Pfeiffer. I am a school bus driver. I'm the president of the union. So during the pandemic, I think the biggest thing was, what are we going to do? We're going to not have jobs. Are they going to need us anymore? It was a stressful time, especially for the new drivers. They were on the verge of can I do this? One of the other drivers saw on the news that the federal relief funds could be used to retain and train drivers. I was like, kind of got my gears rolling. So I asked questions. I don't want to say that I got the ball rolling. It's not just me. It's all of us, but I did get a $500 bonus to retain the drivers. And it meant a lot to us because it was a tough year. Supporting drivers is also supporting the students because we're the first face that they see every morning before they go to school. And just seeing the smiles on their faces, it's a very rewarding job. I've never been in a union. This is the first time that I've ever had a job that had an association. It means a great deal to me now being the voice of our drivers.
Yeah, so Scott is a school bus driver. Obviously, he's from Maine. He's the local union president. I love that he introduces himself, I think, with a really simple but effective intro. You know, I'm Scott Pfeiffer. I'm a school bus driver. I'm the president of the union. And he's very natural in his storytelling. You can tell he's not reading off a script. He's like, I got my gears rolling. I think the lesson there is to be yourself, right? Like someone said earlier in the chat, no one can tell your stories like you. That's your power, right? You're authentic. You have your own experiences to tell. And when you tell them, you should, be like Scott, just like, it's very relatable, I think. And although, I don't know that he's ever trained in the NA message framework, he does make it a little bit about students, right? Like he talks about how I say hello to them. We want to retain bus drivers because it's good for students. There's a lot of simple things that he's doing that don't seem complicated, but are really effective. So.
And with that, now it's your turn. So we're hoping the chat will just light up. So we're gonna get a chance to meet more of our colleagues in the chat. So if you could, in 20 words or less, tell us who you are. For example, I'm Brenda Alvarez, an NEA communications writer who tells stories about the life-changing work our members do every day. That's an example. Or I could be Brenda Alvarez, a para educator from Illinois who works one-on-one with a student who has severe disabilities and who just learned how to feed himself. So that's roughly about 20 words. So if you could share with us something similar, we would love to read some of them out loud. And Mary Ellen, I'm going to need you for that because I can't see it.
Yeah, I will definitely do it.
Right.
I was just thinking who I could be. A different Mary Ellen Flannery. Somebody who gives warm greetings to the 60 kids on my bus. Helps them get to school safely. All right. Nice. I am Bonnie, Parapro and Union Secretary. I work with different needs of students. Yeah, students who come with very different needs. Thank you, Bonnie. Just a little detail like that gives people an idea, I think, of how much work you have to do. Phyllis, behavioral specialist in Alabama City Schools 9th grade academy. Oh, they're going faster. Margaret, what? We just listened to you. I analyzed discipline data to identify disproportionalities and inequities. Nice, thank you. Tammy, custodian, keeps the building clean for students' best learning environment. Nice, Tammy, you're using the NEA message framework. That's awesome. Cheryl from Las Vegas, working with seniors on credit recovery. Oh, what a good job. Hi, Margaret. We didn't know you were going to be here when we put you in our slide. That's awesome. Alicia from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. She's a para, works in SPED. Every student needs to feel special. I love that. Laura is a one-to-one para for a junior and high school student. And junior and high school, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, these are all great examples. And you see just what a little bit of detail does. Like you're not just saying, you're not just like saying your name and your title, right? It's you're giving a little extra. Because again, like most people have gone to public schools and have had their, their own paras, their own bus drivers, their own, cafeteria staff. So it's all very relatable.
Cheryl's the elementary school secretary for 23 years. Taking care of my students, staff, and families, my passion. Robin is a middle school ES paraprofessional and union president. My students become my children. I worry about them while I'm not at school. Oh, Robin, I don't know. That's a lot of kids to worry about. Yeah. David, oh, it's going, moving so fast. Teach meta competencies each and every day. That's awesome. Helen's a paraprofessional, 20 years experience in special ed. The best part of my career is seeing my students shine. Yes, I do consider each student mine. I love that, Helen. Jackie is a special ed resource assistant in Clarksville, Tennessee. I love working with students because I believe it's my calling from God to help educate, nurture, and love our babies. That's lovely. And we got a school registrar. You are the first impression. Yes, my interaction determines the parents and students' outlook for our school. It's very impactful. Roderick's a support staff VP and member organizer, help members and potential members understand what our union is about. Well, thank you, Roderick, for doing that work. Diana works with special needs students in middle school, and they're the reason I go to work every day. Oh, that's lovely, Diana.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can see, like, as Mary Ellen was reading some of these, like, I had smiles in my face. Like, I
Yes.
love the language about students and the best part of the day. Like, you know, that kind of draws out some of the emotions in someone. So thank you all for popping those in the chat for us. We're gonna get to the fun one, exercising jargon.
Yeah. I mean, so every profession has jargon, but we have so much in education. It's kind of crazy. And especially in NEA, you know, as ESPs, I'm sure a lot of people don't understand the words you use, especially if you're working in special ed. We use jargon because it's efficient, and sometimes it's like a little shorthand, and for educators to talk to educators, you know, we usually know what we're talking about. When you talk to non-educators, they have no idea. And understanding is essential to making connections and moving people. And so let us try to identify some of the jargon we commonly use here, and try to figure out alternate ways of saying those things so that everybody understands. You know, I'm thinking of things like ARP. I don't know if you guys remember that, like American Rescue Plan, HERF, even ESL, ESE, ESEA. There's a lot of that stuff. So if you are aware of jargon that you use or that your colleagues and other educators use, drop it into the chat, and let's workshop your jargon and come up with more easy to understand terms. Oh, like I have ESP. Yes, it's kind of it is. I mean, I often talk about support staff or just educators. Diana says, I'm asked that question all the time. What does ESP stand for? Yeah, I mean, we know what it stands for. So if you all, SRP, if you all have alternates that you use in your communities instead of ESP, drop it into the chat. Tell me what you guys most commonly use in your workplaces. And I got to tell you, there's still a lot more of these classified, says Margaret. Yes, Dorothy, our research does show that people understand what school support staff means. And also I try, you know, when I'm writing stuff, to use just specific job titles, like to say, you know, school bus driver or cafeteria staff or, you know, office administrator. Yeah, people say support staff, classified. I don't know that everyone even knows what classified means, though. I know what you mean, but I don't know that somebody who's, you know, not in a school district would know what that means. And I got to pop back into our last question because there's so many good stories in here of people describing what they do.
Nice, do it.
I know. Veronica's an instructional assistant, went from self-contained, is now a floater at high school, shadowing students, encouraging them to stay focused. She loves her job. Candace has been given the nickname Sunshine Ambassador, first impression. I love that. She greets faculty, parents, and students with a smile. It's a choice she makes every day. I love to sprinkle love everywhere I go. That is gorgeous. Ashanti works with students 5, 6, 7, 8, little humans with communication and learning disabilities. And Laverne is a cafeteria worker. I'm passionate about what the kids eat every day, and she's going to King University for early childhood. That's a lot of work to to go to school and work at the same time. Extra special people. That's what ESP stands for. Now we know. I use team teaching assistant, says David, instead of ESP or even SSP, which stands for student support person. Yeah, I think that's a good solution, David. That is easier for people to understand. Aid, yeah, that is more commonly understood too. Support staff. SPED. I don't think everyone knows what SPED is. Natalie, I assume you mean special ed. I guess people know special ed, but I don't know if they know that SPED is the acronym.
Yeah.
Tammy says, I use both support staff and education support professionals in my discussions. Tammy, I think if you were like actually saying all three words, education support professionals, people do understand what you say. But ESP, not so much. Education support personnel is cool. Yep. Specialized professional teachers assistant, meaning paraprofessional or district. Yep, that's understandable. Special people educating disabilities. Oh, gotcha. Yes, they know SPED. Okay.
Yeah, and I think when you do spell it out,
Yeah.
people do get it, but it's just those short 3-letter, acronyms that most people won't get right away.
IEP, says Phyllis. Yeah, I mean, if you work in this world, you know what IEP is. But individualized education plan. It's just, it's a plan that you really have to kind of spell it out for people to understand.
Mm-hmm.
BIP. I don't know what that is. BIP? You know what that is, Brenda?
No, I'm thinking about it. BIP?
Yeah, P, like potato chip.
I don't.
Oh, behavioral intervention plan. Thank you.
Ah.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah.
Yeah, see, I couldn't even figure it out.
Yeah. Oh, thank you all. So you all know what it is. Thank you.
Right. But the goal is, you're communicating your story, you're communicating what you do to people that you want to get, to join you. So that's why it's critical. It's just be, mindful. If you're talking to a bunch of, of your colleagues, or if you're in a meeting and everyone knows what what it's about, then, that's okay. But when you're in these public spaces, it's really critical to be mindful of the words and phrases that you're using.
A BMC, behavior modification coach. Yeah. Or like, I was talking to someone yesterday about SLPs, and I got it. It was speech language pathologist, but at first I was like, I don't know. Sylvia Ortega, school bus driver. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Ortega. All right, let's move on, Brenda. I think everyone gets it. NEA and education in general has so many TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. That is for sure.
Yes.
PL, parent liaison. Yeah. Technology teaching assistant. That's when a teaching assistant works with a student with a 504 accommodation on any education technology. I don't know that everyone's heard of that yet.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on.
Okay.
So we're getting near the end. So now it's your turn. So we just kind of went through jargon. But we'd also like to hear from you about what you're facing back home. What's a personal story that you have? And by personal story, I know we used the term storytelling, but this is really a moment, right? It's an anecdote that you could share and connect it to an issue. So if you can throw in the chat a challenge that you're facing within your school community, and let's talk about it, right? And remember everything that we talked about earlier, right? Does it involve people? Does it have emotion? Is there a call to action that you could pair it with? What do you want people to do? So let's start throwing some things in the chat. What's an issue, a challenge that you're currently faced with? And think about a moment in your everyday that you could connect that challenge to inspire people to join you. I was, to give you an example, I was giving you, just some general examples, but if you're a para and you're upset about class sizes, what is it about your day that can speak to that? If you're, if your district is trying to privatize, food services, what is it about what you do that adds value to the students and to the school that you could share with that challenge? So I wrote a story about a member. She is a library associate in Illinois, and she just talked about the power of books, right? And she was very vulnerable, and she was like, I wasn't a good student, but I thrived in my school library, which is why I wanted to work in the setting. And she's an ESP, and she just really made that connection of just having access to such rich literature, because she's from Illinois and they just outlawed bans on book bans. So she's really excited about that, because now her students have access to all sorts of, age appropriate material. So that's
We have a couple ideas in the chat, Brenda. I hate to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah. No, that was a good idea. So let's hear them.
All right. So Ashanti mentions living wage, right? Like that's something that's a really important story. And I think you can, to a certain extent, kind of apply the message framework to that, the NEA message framework, because it's, if you can't afford to do this job, your students aren't going to have you committed educator who cares about them in their classroom. Robin mentioned safe working environment for paraprofessional and students. And Brenda, I know you've been writing a lot about safety in classrooms, and that could be a lot of things, Robin. Like it could be, school shootings, or just could be, things happening in your classroom that endanger kids and educators. That is really important stories. WA says a lack of support and lack of respect involving special ed. Yeah, that's been never fully funded the way it's supposed to be. And I think there's a lot of ways you could show that about, kids just not getting what they need. Students and families getting timely academic support and intervention. Yes, that's also partly kind of a timing thing, like or funding thing. Like, are there the people you need in your school? Like, do you have everybody? I think I missed one. Parents and other people using social media to complain about issues instead of going to school or board meetings to address issues and student behaviors. We clear classrooms for students getting upset. Yeah, I think that's a more common thing. A sudden transfer to another classroom or school and not being sensitive to the transition, not giving us time to prepare the students. Yes, we should all be kind. Right. Play, research. So this is also from Ashanti. Play and recess. Having appropriate playtime is a learning tool for students. Absolutely, right? I mean, especially your little ones. Play is learning. Invisible disability, says Eric. They're invisible. Yeah, I hope people are becoming more aware of the disabilities that are not, not visual, not visual, the parent. Housing security. Yep, there's a lot of people who are unhoused. I have students that are enrolling in school for the first time this school year because of financial circumstances parents are facing. For example, eviction, homelessness. If students miss the bus, parents can't afford gas to drive them to school. Housing security is real. Housing insecurity is real out here, and inflation is hurting my community. That's huge in so many places. It's just, there's a lack of affordable housing. And when you can put it in terms like that, Erica, about the effect that it has on students, I think those are really powerful stories. How's that kid supposed to learn when, they're being evicted and they're living on their aunt's couch or something? Deanna, my issue is that our ESPs don't get enough training to help our children. Working with special needs children has so many aspects, and I feel like they put us in the classrooms and we're not trained to work with them to help them be successful. It's huge. That is a very big issue. Kindness and patience with students, giving short breaks. Yep. Helen, the emphasis on testing is really getting out of control. Yes, let's get back to basics. Students are individuals, not numbers. And David suggests issue is intergenerational, transgenerational, multi-generational community trauma associated with deindustrialization in the North in the 1950s, followed by the pandemic in 2020. Yeah, I mean, there's so much trauma in people. All right, I'm trying to be mindful of the time, but we
Yeah.
only have 10 minutes left. So should we move on? I love all these story ideas, though. I think they're really rich.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So now that you clearly know your challenge, and so now it's digging a little deeper to talk about how you relate or connect to that challenge, to really craft a really powerful anecdote. So here is our last video that we will share with you. Do you want me to just hit play, Mary Ellen?
Yeah, I mean, this is an oldie, but it's a good one. Just keep in mind, as you know, as it plays, is, you know, how does she introduce herself? Do you see the NEA message triangle? Is there focus on students? Listen for details, call to action, and, you know, feel free again to jump into the chat.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Shireen Akbari, and I'm an unemployed high school history teacher from Broward County, Florida. I was one of 1,400 teachers laid off in my district. I had just purchased a house and moved in on May 1st. And as he told you, 5 days later, on the last day of Teachers Appreciation Week, I was handed a nice embroidered jacket and a pink slip. I'm worried about losing my home, which I bought thinking I was going to have a long career in education. Of course, I have my own concerns. How am I going to pay my bills, pay for my house, see a doctor? But I'm more worried about my students. News of the layoff spread quickly throughout my school, and several of my students stopped by my room to see if the rumors were true. One student was visibly upset, and she told me that I made her want to learn. Another burst into tears in front of an entire classroom of students. When I tried to console her, she said to me, "You don't understand. You changed my life. I want to major in history in college because of you. I want to become a teacher because of you." I didn't know what to say, and it broke my heart. I couldn't help but wonder, if she became a teacher, would there even be a job available for her? Instead of being in front of students today, I'm here. And I'm here to urge Congress to pass the Teachers and First Responders Back to Work Act. I'm one of hundreds of thousands of teachers in the United States out of work. This bill could provide immediate relief. It would put teachers back in their classrooms where they belong. It will help reduce class sizes, ensuring our students will learn better and receive more individual attention that they deserve. If we want to compete globally with countries like China and India, then we need to put our money where our mouth is. So I'm asking Congress to pass this bill right now.
So Shireen is the only, she is a teacher. She's the only teacher we have on our presentation tonight. We know that, you know, ESPs are also doing the same work, speaking in front of local and state policymakers. We were thinking about Deborah Ward Mitchell, who was our ESP of the year last year. She was in front of the Illinois State Legislature earlier this year to advocate for ESP pay and benefits. And I'm sure she did a similarly excellent job in putting in the right details and being very explicit about what she wants, you know, lawmakers to do. You know, we all of us have a voice. All of you have a voice. And I think that takes us to our last slide.
Yes. So as it was said earlier, you have experience, you are a trusted voice in your community, and you are the experts. So as you're making your way through your journey of leadership, please make sure you use your powerful stories to make connections with your community. And this is our contact information, so we're more than happy to answer any questions, or if you have a great story idea, you know, please contact us.
Brenda, we have one last comment in the chat from Robin. She says, "I always felt like paraprofessionals are in the trenches with the students, but 2 days ago, a teacher told me that teachers are in the trenches, and the paraprofessionals, are on the battlefield, saving the students and being beside them." Robin, that's amazing. That is really true. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them into the chat. But we're really excited to be here with you tonight, and I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, so feel free to add stuff to the Q&A if you have any questions. One question that we have, Brenda and Mary Ellen, is for someone who's having trouble talking about themselves, how do they become more comfortable talking about themselves?
Yes. So storytelling is a skill. It's a skill. I am continuing to take storytelling training, and I'm actually wrapping up I just wrapped up my 3rd week. So I learned that you have to come from the scar, not the wound, right? So one, if you're not ready to tell your story, then you're gonna need a little bit more time, right? Because some of the things that people face within education are tough, right? And you have to, and you're putting yourself out there to be vulnerable. And sometimes that's not a good feeling, right? But again, we have to kind of push through, and it's going to take work. So if you're not used to, you could start small with people that you love and trust. You can practice with them. Mary Ellen pushed me to start telling my own personal training when we do this training at the National Leadership Summit, and I did not want to, right? But I was just like, well, no, then I'm a fraud, right? So I crafted a story, and it took, it was like 3 minutes, but it took me a long time to craft, because again, I needed to come from the scar and not the wound. So yeah, and I think it's, I don't want to say successful when I share it, but I think people relate to it. So yeah, so I suggest to start off small and practice with someone who you love and trust, to kind of build it out and build the courage to share it.
Thanks, Brenda. Another question we got is, when is the right time to tell your story?
I would say whenever you have an opportunity, right? I mean, some places are more scripted, if you will, like a school board meeting, a union meeting, if you're meeting with parents, right? If you have a campaign, right? If you're, collective bargaining, maybe, coming your way soon, and things that are important to you are on the table. So part of that campaign is to get member voices into the space. So, if you run into a parent and there's an issue in your community, you can talk to that parent at the grocery store. So really, Mary Ellen talked about this in one of her slides. So just whenever you have an opportunity and you have an issue that needs attention, that's the best time to really tell your story.
Yeah, Margaret popped into the chat, says every day, every meeting. I agree, Margaret, all the time. And Lee also asked Brenda, are we willing to do this session with locals? Yeah, I mean, we'll go anywhere, really.
Yeah,
or we'll do it online or whatever. We really like to spend more time with people so that they can, really start developing their stories.
Right. When we do this in person, we spend 45 minutes on the slide where it said, now it's your turn. And we have people work in groups to really kind of develop the issue that they're working on, and make those personal connections to it. So
yeah, in the chat now, it says the system really is a pipeline to prison, and we've got to do our part to change the trajectory. Yes, there's so much at stake here. And in your stories, I really do believe, can make a difference.
Are there some ways that they can use their story to organize? I know we talked a lot about using it for advocacy.
yeah, absolutely. So there's this whole thing about story of self, the story of us, and then the story of now, and that's all related to organizing. So if you're working on a campaign, and say if you're the organizer, it's about how do you insert yourself in the story, to make that connection with the collective group. And then from the collective group, then you talk about your campaign. So we're showing up to the school board meeting because they're going to privatize our food service. Let's show up as well. Let's counter the narrative. So yes, there's definitely ways you can definitely use storytelling as part of organizing, because again, you want as many people to join you in the movement work that you're doing. So in the organizing space, storytelling is a perfect opportunity to share your experiences.
Mhm.
And this question is similar to the one earlier. There's another person who said that they're hesitant to tell their story, but it's easier to share other people's story and how to become more comfortable. And yeah, I think Brenda already answered that one earlier. And then another one is, where can they share their stories with the editorial team? Is there like a place where they could submit their stories? We actually have a email too that people can send their stories to, and I could put that in chat.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay, great. Yeah, so you can email you can email us directly. We also have the NEA Today at NEA.org, where we get kind of submissions from the general public. You could send stuff there, but it's probably better to email the account Dorothy's going to put in the chat, or email one of or both of us.
Thanks,
All right.
Dorothy.
I believe those are all the questions. I'm going to turn it back over to Kimberly.
To request a general session specific certificate of completion as a participant of recorded sessions, please send your request by emailing espqweb@nea.org. All requests must include the session title and the on-screen certificate of completion code. Session certificates will not be provided if your viewer code is not included in the email request. Note, due to limitations in our ability to track attendance after live sessions, requests for personalized certificates will only be provided for participants of live webinars whose attendance can be verified. The certificate received for viewing recorded sessions will be session specific, but will not include personalized names. On behalf of the Center for Professional Excellence in Student Learning's NEA ESP Quality Department, I'd like to once again thank our presenters and guest speakers for joining us this evening, and thank you all for your participation. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night from the ESP Quality Department.